Well, we also heard from House Democratic leaders and Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. We will have those remarks for you later on the C-SPAN networks, or you can go online to cspan.org. And now back live to the U.S. House, members gaveling in for work on water resource projects.
Compassionate and merciful God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. Give the members of this House strength, fortitude, and patience. Fill their hearts with charity, their minds with understanding, their wills with courage to do the right thing for all of America. In the work to be done in the weeks to come, may they rise together to accomplish what is best for our great nation. Just as we remembered yesterday the passing of two former members of the People's House, Tom Foley and Bill Young, we pray today for the Honorable Major Owens. We thank you for the service he rendered to his constituents and to our nation, and ask your blessing upon those who mourn his passing. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal? Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Obama made some big promises with regard to Obamacare. If you like your doctor, you can keep them. Same if you're happy with your insurance. Somehow, even with new taxes and thousands of pages of regulations, government would be able to mandate universal coverage and simultaneously save everyone money. That's not panning out in America. North Carolinians tell me their policies are being canceled and their prices are set to double. Experts are even advising some Americans to find a way to lower their incomes to help pay for Obamacare. For one family in California, if they don't find a way to earn $2,000 less, they will pay $15,000 for health care. If they make less money, they'd pay just over $1,000. It's easy to blame technical glitches for Obamacare's problems. It's harder to own up to the costly consequences of forcing a one-size-fits-all health care prescription onto 1/6 of the American economy. As President Obama presses forward with Obamacare, a broken website is certainly the least of his problems. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Arizona seek recognition?
I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend.
Gentlelady from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
The folks in my Arizona district have seen enough of the partisan nonsense in Washington. The distractions here help no one, but jobs do. And that's why we have to stay focused on economic development. In my district, those opportunities include strengthening our infrastructure. At the Grand Canyon, the Trans-Canyon Pipeline is in desperate need of repair, and the canyon's maintenance backlog continues to grow. In the White Mountains, we can revive the timber industry by building on the momentum of the Eager Sawmill and the Fort Apache Timber Company. And with a new contractor on board, it's time to shift the Forest Restoration Initiative into high gear and help our forests. Projects like these create jobs and improve the quality of life for folks in rural Arizona. I urge my colleagues to work together on common sense efforts to create jobs. And I yield back.
Time. What purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition? Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In August, the Explosive Ordnance Disposal community lost one of its best and brightest. Army Staff Sergeant Joshua Bowden of Villa Rica, Georgia, was killed in action on August 31, 2013 at the age of 28 while serving his country in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Bowden joined the United States Army in 2005 and was on his second deployment to Afghanistan. His awards included the Joint Service Commendation Medal with Valor, Purple Heart, Joint Defense Meritorious Service Medal, NATO Medal, Combat Action Badge, Senior Explosive Ordnance Disposal Badge, Parachutist Badge, and Air Assault Badge. As co-chairman of the House EOD Caucus along with Congresswoman Susan Davis, I was honored to meet Staff Sergeant Bowden in 2011 during our caucus's first annual EOD Day on the Hill. The purpose of this event was to educate members and staff about the critical mission EOD forces play in defending American interests both at home and abroad. Staff Sergeant Bowden was a patriot who was willing to put himself in the line of fire to defend our country's way of life, and I'm proud to have met him. In September, Staff Sergeant Bowden was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. It's important that we take time regularly to reflect on the sacrifices made by our nation's servicemen and women and the veterans who preceded them. I'm honored to have met Staff Sergeant Joshua Bowden, and my thoughts and prayers are with his friends and family.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition? Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since October 1st, millions of Americans have attempted to access healthcare.gov to try to learn about the health insurance coverage they're required to buy. And every day we're learning more and more about the problems they're facing. Folks are frustrated, and rightfully so. I'm proud to be part of a bipartisan effort to reform the law by repealing the mandate that employers provide coverage they can't afford and the mandate that individuals buy insurance on their own. Earlier this year, the administration delayed the employer mandate because businesses across the country just weren't ready, but not the individual mandate. At the very least, our constituents deserve the same relief that businesses got. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about providing some relief to the folks we represent who are facing serious uncertainty because they're being forced to buy something that's just not ready. I urge my colleagues and the administration to delay the individual mandate. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the only practical thing to do. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today with my great concern of the lack of accountability and transparency with the President and the administration over the entire health care exchange and their platform with their website. Mr. Speaker, we have walked through the tragedy of Benghazi, the abuse of the IRS, the lack of real commitment from the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, this isn't right. We need a government who is transparent, who is willing to tell the truth to the American people. 3 weeks after the rollout of these exchanges, the administration finally has come to Capitol Hill. But they're coming, Mr. Speaker, with only to speak to House Democrats. Now figure that out. Where's the transparency there? The American people deserve to know the truth. What happened with the $400 million that was spent on a website to try to enlist people to join this health care exchange? The American people have been left on the hook for a website that costs these hundreds of millions of dollars, and they deserve better. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does a gentlelady from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker, to ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
It's always good to have a number of good news stories for my colleagues and the American people, and I'm delighted to have a good news story, which is that the Affordable Care Act is rolling along, and recognizing that the most important aspect of this law is that Americans like Kendall Brown in Oklahoma City are having their lives changed in front of their eyes. She writes to the President that she has Crohn's disease, and she has already benefited from this Affordable Care Act by being able to stay on her parents' insurance. But now she's able to enroll, and she wrote in this letter that as individuals are debating to delay the individual mandate, she said, Mr. President, if they do it, then this is the last letter that you'll receive from me because I'll be dead by the time I'm 27 years old. So the good news is, my friends, enroll. You can use 1-800-1800-318 $25.96. 30,000 calls in only 20 seconds in wait time. You can use the navigators. You can use the outreach efforts. You can even get on the web and be educated. 1-800-318-2596. We are rolling along. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and then revise and extend my...
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in order to recognize the fact that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. In my home state of Michigan, breast cancer is currently the second leading cause of cancer death for women, and is the most frequently diagnosed cancer for women in Michigan. I served as a doctor for 30 years in northern Michigan. I'm all too familiar with how devastating breast cancer is for patients and their friends and their loved ones. Thankfully, early detection rates have increased and mortality rates have decreased nationwide. This is partially due to the hard work of the doctors, nurses, and medical professionals who are involved in diagnosing and treating this illness and in coming up with innovative new treatment options. This improvement is also due to the fundraising, outreach, and public awareness efforts of groups like the Michigan Breast Cancer Coalition and the National Breast Cancer Foundation. However, there is still much work left to be done. I urge all of my colleagues and all of my constituents to raise awareness of breast cancer, to take the steps necessary in order to detect this terrible disease. I encourage all women to be sure they're up to date on their mammogram.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from Oregon seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Congress must act without delay to provide certainty to employers, keep families together, and ensure that all children raised here in America have access to affordable higher education. Less than a decade ago, it might have been impossible to imagine that so many businesses, farm workers, labor leaders, educators, and even politicians would come together to support comprehensive reform of our broken immigration system, a system that no longer reflects our values or national interests. The American public has reached consensus, as has the United States Senate. It's time for members of the House to put aside their differences and pass a bill that grows the economy, creates a modernized immigration system, enhances our security, and creates an achievable path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. I encourage the leadership to bring comprehensive, common sense, and compassionate immigration reform legislation to the House floor this fall. Mr. Speaker, the time to act is now. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
Seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Today's much anticipated and greatly needed water resources bill will allow our nation to develop and maintain our economically vital ports and waterways, and will support flood protection and environmental restoration efforts. As a water-centered state, Florida is uniquely impacted by the Water Resources Reform and Development Act. We have 16 seaports, which contributed $96.6 billion to the economy last year. And our maritime cargo industry supports more than 680,000 jobs. Florida has invested millions in our ports in preparation for the expansion of the Panama Canal, and this bill before us today is a complement to Florida's investment in world-class maritime infrastructure. Without this bill, Florida, and indeed our nation as a whole, are at risk of losing jobs to nearby foreign ports and their ready or soon-to-be-ready deep draft harbors. Simply put, this bipartisan water resources bill will create good American jobs and will grow local economies. Let's pass it, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Rhode Island recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, last week Congress finally took action to end a painful, unnecessary government shutdown that cost our economy $24 billion, forced hundreds of thousands of federal workers to stay home, and brought us to the brink of defaulting on the full faith and credit of the United States. While the hardworking men and women I serve in Rhode Island's 1st District are relieved that Congress finally did its job, they want all of us to get back to work on addressing the urgent challenges facing our nation, creating jobs, strengthening our economy, fixing our broken immigration system, repairing our crumbling infrastructure, and finding responsible ways to reduce the federal debt. Like all Americans, Rhode Islanders want their elected officials to get beyond the political battles of the moment and work together on implementing effective policies and innovative solutions that will put our country on the right track and get Americans back to work. Over the past several years, the House has voted over and over again on bills that would repeal Obamacare, restrict reproductive freedom for women, weaken critical environmental standards, and limit collective bargaining rights for workers, even though there's no chance these divisive proposals will ever be signed into law. It's time now to get things done. Each of us should commit to abandoning the partisan rhetoric and working as colleagues to overcome the challenges facing our country and those we have the privilege to represent here in the Congress. Thank you.
Purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
To ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute for revising the no vote.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, now that Obamacare has had 23 days of what has been a disastrous rollout and hundreds of thousands of Americans are getting health insurance cancellation notices, I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what's happening in Georgia. In our state, the news is not good. One constituent tells me, and I quote, "Not only are premiums higher, but we have to pay more out of pocket. I will end up spending about $500 to $600 a year on durable medical supplies that have always been covered 100%. That does not help the middle class." Another shared the news that he recently learned from his employer, and again, I quote, "My premiums are going up over $1,200 a year, and my deductible is going up by over $1,000 a year, and my out-of-pocket maximum will move from $3,500 to $6,500. That is more than a house payment for many Georgians, Mr. Speaker. These are hardworking middle-class families in my district who were promised by the President that if they liked their insurance, they could keep their current health care plans. Now these plans are more expensive, and my constituents have less coverage. This is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. And contrary to the President's promises, Obamacare is driving up costs, threatening jobs, and kicking Georgians out of the plans they liked and were promised they could keep. Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, New York City lost a Brooklyn original, and our nation lost a tireless champion for the powerless. Representative Mayor Owen's district included part of my current district, and I can attest firsthand that he was beloved throughout Brooklyn. A librarian before entering politics, service to community was simply part of who he was, and that is reflected by his accomplishments. His work led to the creation of the Youth Bill initiative at HUD, which today creates opportunity for thousands of disadvantaged youth through construction in low-income communities. Mayor will also be remembered for his work on the Americans with Disability Act, always a voice for the voiceless. He shepherded that historic bill to enactment, creating a more just society for millions of Americans. He is perhaps the only member of Congress known for composing rap lyrics, performing at open mic sessions. He spoke to the issues of our time, addressing peace, war, poverty, and social justice through the power of hip-hop. Mr. Speaker, those of us in New York and Brooklyn today mourn the loss of a neighbor, while our nation honors the passing of its steadfast public servant. I hope all my colleagues join me in paying tribute to and remembering our friend and former colleague, Mayor Owens. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Kansas seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of greater accessibility to taxpayer-funded research. This week is Open Access Week in America, and I'm proud to be a lead co-sponsor of the Fair Access to Science and Technology Research Act, better known as FASTER. Access to scientific research maximizes research investments and improves the quality of science while assuring transparency and efficient use of tax dollars. Simply put, taxpayers should not have to pay for taxpayer-funded research over and over again. Policy like FASTER has been a tremendous success already at the National Institutes of Health and some of the best research institutions in America, like my alma mater, the University of Kansas, have helped lead the charge by instituting open access policies of their own. Now it's time to make open access the law of the land for all publicly funded research. I urge my colleagues to make a real impact on the quality of science and life-saving research conducted in America and urge them to co-sponsor and support the Fair Access to Science and Technology Research Act. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? The gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. An opportunity to stand with millions of victims who have suffered in silent fear in their own homes. Approximately 3 women are killed each day as a result of domestic violence, according to the National Network to End Domestic Violence. While our country has made enormous strides in combating domestic violence, gaps in federal law leave millions vulnerable. In this nation, 1 in 6 women will find themselves a victim of stalking in their lifetime. And many of these encounters turn violent, and tragically, women are hurt or killed by their stalkers because of a glaring loophole in federal law. Under the current law, convicted stalkers of intimate partners are prohibited from possessing firearms, but women who have had no romantic relationship with their stalker are left unprotected. So I've introduced the Protecting Victims of Stalking Act legislation that would address this glaring loophole and prevent stalkers under restraining orders from purchasing firearms. I hope you'll join me in this effort to reconfirm our commitment to protecting victims of domestic violence. I yield back. Thank you for the extra time.
The gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Nevada seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Nevada is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mike Lansbury, math teacher at Sparks Middle School, passed away just about 50 hours ago. He was 45, an Alabama native, high school athlete, coach, husband, dad, Marine, Nevada Air Guard Senior Master Sergeant, and a friend. Mike Lansbury observed the horror of an active shooter at his school Monday morning and simply moved without hesitation, instinctively, into harm's way to protect others. In so doing, Mike made the ultimate sacrifice in service to the end to his students, his school, and his community. Coach, you humble us all with your warrior spirit, your compassion. They will be your lasting legacy. Thank you for your service, and may you rest in peace.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
It's unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Stephen Adubano Sr., the founder of the North Ward Center, an inspiring figure of Newark, New Jersey. To recognize Mr. Adubano's achievements and contributions, a statue of him reading to 2 young children will be placed on the main campus of the North Ward Center. Mr. Adubano began his career in education and as a teacher in Newark, and went on to develop the North Ward Center in 1970, a group of 5 institutions designed to provide educational, cultural, and meaningful social services to low and moderate-income families in the area. From its humble beginnings as a small preschool, the center now includes an adult medical daycare, a business training center, as well as the Robert Treat Academy, a charter school that has received national recognition and the honor of being named a Blue Ribbon School. Since the founding of the center, Stephen Adubano Sr. has continually worked to improve the quality of life for everyone in the community, from young and senior citizens. Mr. Adubano has been honored by numerous organizations and institutions such as Kent University and the Thurgood Marshall College Fund for his contributions and dedication to education. Today, I recognize the accomplishment of Steve Adubano Sr., and I thank him for his continued dedications to the residents of Newark, particularly the North Ward. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of the legislation to be considered on the floor this afternoon, H.R. 3080. The Water Resources Reform and Development Act of 2013. Mr. Speaker, my amendment ruled in order and to be considered en bloc addresses an issue very important to my district in northeast Indiana, as well as other similarly situated districts around the country. I'm proud to represent Fort Wayne, Indiana's second largest city, which has more than 10 miles of levees that protect residents and businesses. In response to recent Army Corps of Engineers guidelines requiring levee devegetation, local governments across the country affected by this policy have made their voices heard. Unfortunately, this unnecessary policy will cost taxpayers in my district millions of dollars. My amendment saves the city of Fort Wayne $25 million and makes levee safety the highest priority, while allowing the Army Corps of Engineers to fully examine the guidelines, study the guidelines authorized in the underlying bill. I thank Chairman Schuster for his assistance and look forward to further pursuing solutions to this issue. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House and revise and extend.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, later today, the water bill will come before this body. I intend to vote against it. The reason is that there are 23 earmarks in it. I support all of those projects, but I don't have an earmark in it, and I want one. I am not one of those people who's going to pretend to the public, as many of us have, that earmarks cost the budget any more money than it does. It does not. And we go around and talk about the bridge to nowhere. There is a bridge. It's called the Gravina Island Bridge. And the worst thing about this is constitutionally we have the power of the purse. We've given it to the administration. And so they put 23 projects out here, and they said, well, they used to be earmarks. That's like cutting off the tail of an alligator and putting some little ears on him and saying it used to be a dog. Ladies and gentlemen, this is wrong, and the public needs to understand that this earmark business is damaging the Constitution because it's our job to spend the purse. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from North Dakota seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I rise to encourage my colleagues to support today's jobs bill, the Water Resources and Reform Development Act, because it's not an earmark. It authorizes, not appropriates, money for 23 projects identified by the Corps of Engineers as important, and they're important for a number of reasons, not the least of which is their primary purpose is the movement of goods and services into the global marketplace, which creates wealth and jobs for Americans. Further, it authorizes projects that are important to flood protection, to flood-prone areas like the Red River Valley of the North, my area. But in addition to that, the real reforms that are impressive are things like it deauthorizes old projects to the tune of $12 billion worth. And furthermore, it gives more leverage, flexibility for the use of non-federal funds, which is, I think, the very thing that the taxpayers of this state are looking for. The type of flexibility allows local governments and local communities to do the right thing for themselves. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Nevada seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Nearly 73 years ago, as countries across Europe were falling to Hitler's forces, an emissary from Mussolini arrived in Athens to demand the Greeks surrendered and allow the Allied forces to occupy that country. In response, the Greeks courageously replied, no, Ochi, no. The Axis forces quickly descended on Greece, but they failed to anticipate the courage of the Hellenic people, who led a passionate resistance in defense of their freedom and their beloved country. On the island of Crete alone, for example, with only broomsticks and plowshares as weapons, women and children held the Germans at bay for 10 days, breaking their assault. Now, the story of this bravery has largely been overlooked in the history books, but the Greek refusal to surrender proved to be one of the most decisive moments in the war. As Winston Churchill said, if there had not been the virtue and courage of the Greeks, we don't know what the outcome of World War II would have been. On August 28th, Greeks around the world celebrate Ohi Day to honor the legacy of the Greek people and share with the world the story of their bravery. I commend them and say Happy Ohi Day.
Gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition? The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, you know, if you go into a restaurant and you order 2 eggs over medium with sausage and toast, and the server brings you 2 eggs scrambled with bacon and a muffin, you got 2 choices. You either eat what you've got, or you send it back and you start over. Double the cost, double the time. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what's happened with healthcare.gov, the Obamacare health website. It doesn't work. It's not glitches. It's broken, and it can't be fixed. The President needs to own up to this. He needs to reimburse the American people for the over $400 million that's been spent. He needs to hold those in his administration accountable that misled him and the American people. And he needs to give the American people a break on this individual mandate until the website does work. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition? Gentlelady from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we recognize the final days of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I ask Congress to pass legislation that helps put an end to domestic violence. This issue impacts Americans of all backgrounds, regardless of age, race, religion, or economic status. One victim of domestic violence is too many. But the heartbreaking reality is that in this country, 3 women are killed daily by intimate partners. Young women are at a greater risk to be victims of domestic violence. 4 out of every 10 teen girls know someone their age that has been abused by a boyfriend. Last week, I introduced House Resolution 3297, the Teen Dating Violence Education Act, to protect teenage victims of domestic violence. My bill helps provide schools offering domestic violence inclusion programs with the resources to inform students of their legal rights as they relate to dating violence. Our teens deserve to be empowered with the knowledge to create a safe and secure environment free of domestic violence. Ending teen domestic violence now is a good first step towards preventing future domestic violence among adults. I urge my colleagues to co-sponsor H.R. 3297. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition? Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the train wreck of Obamacare continues. In 2007, before he was elected president, the president said that family policy prices would go down $2,500 per family. That was the promise. In 2009, the president promised that if you like your policy, you get to keep it. Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what the president's going to say to Charles from northern Baltimore County, who wrote me yesterday and said, and I want to quote this, quote, "I just received my cancellation letter from Blue Cross regarding my family's insurance policy. My $697 a month health savings account qualifiable policy is no longer compliant. To have a similar product in an Obamacare compliant plan, my premium will increase nearly 40% and have a $7,000 deductible. Yikes. So much for if you like your policy, you'll get to keep it." Mr. Speaker, Charles and his family are not getting a $2,500 cut in their premium. They're getting a $3,300 increase in their premium. Mr. Speaker, their deductible is going up to $7,000 a year. And, Mr. Speaker, they like their plan, but they don't get to keep it.
Gentleman's time has expired.
The train wreck continues.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from Maine seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady from Maine is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow, October 24th, is Food Day, a nationwide movement to promote healthy, affordable, and sustainably produced food. And next week, Congress will begin the process of reconciling the House and Senate farm bills. I know this is a big job, but I want to urge my colleagues to work to come up with a farm bill that promotes healthy, affordable, and sustainably produced food. Without exception, everywhere I go and every group I talk to, from bankers to teachers unions, from veterans to college students, people nod their head when I talk about locally grown, sustainable food. People want to know where their food comes from, and they want to see the farmers in their communities succeed. There is nothing more fundamental than food, And it's time we get serious about creating a food system that works for everyone, for families, for farmers, and for our local communities. If we are going to change our food system, Congress must take this historic opportunity to reform agriculture policy by producing a farm bill that reinvests in our local economies. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, according to a federal report issued yesterday by the Energy Information Administration, natural gas being produced in the Marcellus Shale region is growing faster than expected. Production has now reached 12 billion cubic feet a day. That's 6 times the production rate of 2009. The vast majority of production is coming from Pennsylvania, including the areas of the state that I represent, along with West Virginia. To put this in perspective, the Marcellus alone produces more natural gas than Saudi Arabia. If the Marcellus were its own country, production would rank 3rd in the world after Russia and the rest of the United States. This has led to record low gas prices. It's the reason companies are moving manufacturing back to the United States. It's why consumers have more money in their pockets after paying their bills. Also, Mr. Speaker, data released Monday by the EIA indicates that carbon-related emissions dropped by 3.8% from 2011 to 2012, to their lowest levels since 1994. Mr. Speaker, domestic gas production is helping create a stronger American economy. It's helping us improve the environment, and it's helping America remain competitive. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the President was right last week when he said nobody won after last week's political spectacle. Instead, it was America that lost. But I'm glad that we finally came together and reopened the government. If we had followed the Republican plan, we would only have funded 17% of the entire federal government. Such haphazard funding is really a recipe for a long-term man-made disaster, a colossal failure to invest adequately in our nation's future. So in the next few weeks, we will have the opportunity to come together and once and for all put these funding battles behind us. I understand, we all understand, that agreeing on a budget will not be easy. But that doesn't mean we should wait until the last minute to start talking to one another. Let's get back to work now and start the process of figuring out how we can agree to a balanced and a reasonable fiscal plan that puts middle-class American families first and the American dream back in reach.
The gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker, I unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the life of a truly remarkable woman, Ruby Cole Session, who passed away earlier this month. In 1985, Ms. Sessions' son, Tim Cole, a veteran, a student at Texas Tech University, and a black man, was wrongfully convicted of the rape of a woman in Lubbock County and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He died there of an asthma attack while incarcerated. In 2009, DNA evidence proved that Tim Cole was wrongfully convicted, and in 2010, he received the first posthumous pardon in Texas history. Ms. Sessions fought for justice for her son, but throughout all of that, she still fought for justice for everyone in the state that had been wrongfully convicted. Thanks to her efforts, Texas now has additional safeguards to prevent wrongful convictions and provides restitution to former prisoners who have been exonerated of their crimes. I am honored to have known Ms. Sessions and to have supported her pursuit of justice while I served in the Texas legislature. Her spirit lives on in her reforms and in the many individuals whose lives she has touched. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
For 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. Last Friday, I became aware of the death of a great United States Congressman, Bill Young from Florida. Mr. Young was the senior Republican member, served in this House since 1970. He was a gentle soul, congenial, friendly, always nice to me, and I asked him to join with me in the Tourette Syndrome Caucus, and he did and was one of the founding members. He was a leader in seeking funds for biomedical research, which doubled during the time in which he was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. He understood earmarks were the responsibility of this Congress and fought for them and supported them. He was close friends with John Murtha, and I was proud to serve and know both of them. Both men were in the military reserve, and both men towards the end of their careers recognized that war was wrong in places where they had previously been for it. John Murtha in Iraq, in 2012, Mr. Young said it's time to get out of Afghanistan. A great leader has passed. His funeral will be tomorrow in the state of Florida. I was proud to know him. This country was fortunate to have him serve in this body. I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Tennessee yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to be removed as a co-sponsor of H.J. Res. 62.
Without objection, so ordered. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 385 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 68, House Resolution 385, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, a Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 3080, to provide improvements to the rivers and harbors of the United States, to provide for the conservation and development of water and related resources, and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. Section 2A. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure now printed in the bill, it shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-24. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. B. No amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution and amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of this resolution. C. Each amendment printed in the report of the Committee on Rules shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. D. All points of order against amendments printed in the report of the Committee on Rules or amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of this resolution are waived. Section 3. It shall be in order at any time for the Chair of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure or his designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc offered pursuant to this section shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. The original proponent of an amendment included in such amendments en bloc may insert a statement in the congressional record immediately before the disposition of the amendments en bloc. Section 4. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 hour.
For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to my good friend and colleague from Florida, the gentleman, Mr. Hastings, pending which time I yield also to myself such time as I may consume. During the consideration, the time yielded is for debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to extend and revise their remarks.
Without objection, and the gentleman is recognized for as much time as he wishes to use.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. House Resolution 385 provides a structure rule for consideration of H.R. 3080, the Water Resources Reform and Development Act, first water bill since 2007. The rule makes 24 amendments submitted to the Rules Committee in order, half of which were sponsored by my colleagues across the aisle, and it provides for robust debate in the House of Representatives. The underlying bill was marked up by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, which reported the bill favorably with unanimous bipartisan support. The bill before us today garnered that support because of 4 reasons. First, this bill reforms the federal bureaucracy. This bill is fiscally responsible. This bill strengthens accountability, and this bill creates jobs. Mr. Speaker, talk to anyone around the country that relies on the Army Corps of Engineers. Talk with anyone that depends on our water infrastructure, water resources, and so forth. Talk to anyone who wants to develop a new water resource infrastructure. Talk to anyone who ships in or out of our harbors or ports. Maybe you have the opportunity to talk with our shipping companies, maybe with women and men who work on our tugboats and barges, or maybe with a farmer who needs to get his corn to the right markets, or maybe the manufacturer who needs to ship her product or his product to a foreign customer, or maybe a port director who is trying to get America prepared for the economic opportunities that will come with the larger ships coming through the Panama Canal. Mr. Speaker, if my colleagues spoke with these men and women, they would hear the same refrain. Our bureaucracy delays American investment. Our bureaucracy costs American jobs. Our bureaucracy helps America's foreign competitors. The approval process of our critical water infrastructure takes years too long, and sometimes well over a decade. One project that my friend from Florida is familiar with is a project in Port Everglades, which has been studied for nearly 2 decades. Some bureaucrats have spent their entire career studying this one project. The study of the project of Port Everglades is a prime example of Washington bureaucracy crushing American jobs and America's future. This bill before us today does away with these delays. It sets hard deadlines on the time and cost of the studies. It consolidates or eliminates duplicative studies. It requires concurrent project review by multiple agencies, and it puts our projects on a path to construction. Mr. Speaker, this bill reforms federal bureaucracy, but it also is fiscally responsible. We all know that our nation spends too much. Our nation oftentimes spends money haphazardly, without a plan, without restraint. This bill does not. Chairman Schuster is committed to restraining spending and is committed to managing America's taxpayer dollars wisely. This bill is proof of that. This bill restrains spending. I commend Chairman Schuster and Ranking Member Rahal for actually making the tough choices necessary to get our budget in order. Mr. Speaker, when was the last time an infrastructure bill was brought to the House floor and it cut more than it spent? The bill before us today does just that. It deauthorizes $12 billion of old, inactive projects. It pays for the new projects by canceling old projects, and it sunsets the construction of new projects in order to prevent future backlogs. Mr. Speaker, this bill reforms federal bureaucracy, it's fiscally responsible, and it strengthens accountability. Many of our constituents, when they hear us talk about infrastructure, remember the days of pork barrel spending. Many of our colleagues might remember the 1939 movie about a newly appointed senator who goes to Washington running head-on into a political machine built on earmarks and pork barrel spending. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a dramatic rendering of how most infrastructure bills were put together in the past. In fact, the bill was debated in the movie was a water resource bill, and the filibuster was over an earmark in that bill. This bill ends that earmark process. The bill before us today strengthens accountability for American people. Gone are the days of inserting earmarks at the last minute. Gone are the days of creating new pet projects. Gone are the days of wasting taxpayer money on pork barrel spending. Mr. Speaker, this bill contains no earmarks. It also establishes a new transparent process for future bills that will ensure that taxpayer dollars are spent on necessary projects. It will prioritize our spending and provide strong congressional oversight. This bill reforms federal bureaucracy, it's fiscally responsible, it strengthens accountability, and it creates jobs. The key to creating American jobs is expanding our economy. American producers must be able to get their products to the world market. This push to sell to the world is a high-stakes competition that America must win. Our farmers are being pressured by our neighbors in South America. Our manufacturers are being pressured by both European and Asian countries. Our energy producers are being pressured by many foreign countries in all corners of the globe. Investing in our infrastructure will boost trade, increase American competitiveness, and position our country for economic growth. These advancements will put America to work. While construction workers will immediately be put to work on these projects, every single American job that depends on our transportation infrastructure will benefit from this bill. Our economy will grow, our producers will compete with the world, and American jobs will be created. Mr. Speaker, it is easy to see why this bill garnered a unanimous bipartisan support from the members of the committee and why it deserves to be passed here. This bill reforms federal bureaucracy. This bill is fiscally responsible. This bill strengthens accountability. This bill creates jobs. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the rule and the underlying bill. Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member Rahal, and the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure have provided us with a unanimously supported bipartisan bill that will move our nation forward. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Florida for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today. I agree with everything that my good friend and colleague from Florida said, everything that he said, with the exception of the fact that I'm opposed to the rule. While I may support the underlying legislation, the rule blocks over 70 amendments, many of which were germane to the bill. This kind of rule is not conducive to an open process. The bill, though far from perfect, is long overdue. There's a lot of go nowhere, do nothing, talk about creating jobs here on the Hill. But this bill, like the highway bill and the farm bill, will actually create jobs. The bill also reinforces a point that I've been making for some time, and that is repairing our nation's aging infrastructure, including our water infrastructure, is the best jobs program out there. The resulting economic benefits will ripple from our ports to Main Street America as badly needed jobs across a wide range of industries. For example, every dollar spent on Everglades restoration, like the ones authorized here, is returned fourfold by stimulating related industries like tourism, construction, and retail. Despite these undeniable benefits, it's been 7 years since the last Word bill. That's 7 years of productivity lost. But if you think 7 years is a long time, try waiting 17 years, as my colleague Mr. Webster pointed out. That's how long Port Everglades has been waiting for a chief's report from the Army Corps to deepen its channels in anticipation of the new Panama Canal standards. And at long last, the report is due shortly. Yet this bill fails to authorize the pending project. While much of the blame for the delay falls outside of this chamber, Congress can and should do right by the port. Mr. Speaker, the port has already waited its turn. With the new Panama Canal expansion becoming operational in 2015, any further delay for such a vital piece of our nation's infrastructure will be too late. I do understand that tough choices have to be made. The way I see it, the Army Corps' lengthy review process is in part to blame for the backlog of projects. Though this bill contains some partisan measures addressing this issue, the Corps has already begun testing its own way of increasing the speed of review. One of these successful tests was the pilot program for the Central Everglades Planning Project. Yet that project is not included in this bill either, despite the Chief's report for CEP being anticipated within a few months. This new approach, when coupled with a more frequent word bill, could help eliminate the massive backlog of projects that has forced Congress to make these tough decisions. When we look at what CEP actually does, the urgency for authorization is even more obvious. CEP will help end the discharges of polluted water from Lake Okeechobee that have been devastating Florida communities for years. The water is choked green with algae and killing wildlife, tourism, fishing, and oyster industries, particularly in the Indian River area of our state. The people of Florida can't wait for another word bill to roll around. The streamlined, successful pilot program is infinitely more preferable than the streamlining of environmental review contained in this bill. My friends across the aisle seem oddly opposed sometimes to having fresh water and clean air and attacking NEPA and environmental regulations at every opportunity, including otherwise inappropriate vehicles like this bill. But I understand that no one is happy all the time. I do have grave reservations about some of the policies in the bill and hope that we can work them out through the legislative process. There's no need for Congress to make the waters rougher than they already are. Let's continue to do our work constituents sent us here to do, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would yield the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber, 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, nearly 1/3 of our economy depends on international trade, and 99% of that trade passes through our nation's ports. Since transportation accounts for as much as 10% of the cost of the products we buy, it is so very critically important that our ports and waterways run efficiently and are properly maintained. I am proud to be a co-sponsor of the Water Resources Reform and Development Act, which is a part of the critical role laid out to Congress by our founding fathers in regulating interstate commerce. With this bill, we can reform the Army Corps of Engineers' management of important infrastructure projects and reduce their project backlog in order to create the conditions for a much stronger American economy. Mr. Speaker, this bill does that, and that's why I'm proud to support it, and I yield back.
Back is time. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Massachusetts, my good friend, Mr. McGovern.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague from Florida for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, let me first of all begin by opposing the rule. This House is becoming much too closed. And I would remind my Republican colleagues of the promises they made when they took over this place. They promised a more open and more transparent House of Representatives. What we have seen is closed and restricted rules time and time and time again. There is no reason why this can't be an open rule. So I'd urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote against the rule. Secondly, with regard to the underlying bill, it is my intention to support the underlying bill, but I do have serious reservations. The proponents of this bill talk about the streamlining provisions that are in this bill that somehow streamline the environmental review process, that it somehow the environmental review process causes delays. I would remind my colleagues that the facts are clear, that delays are caused by funding that doesn't correspond to the demand. The last WRDA bill authorized over $23 billion in new projects, and since that time, appropriations have been at $1.5 billion per year. And the Ryan budget, which my Republican colleagues seem to love so much, will cut that by another third. Add to that sequestration and all the other budget cuts that my colleagues are proposing here. It is lack of money, not environmental reviews, that are causing the delays. And further, environmental reviews are really the only way voters have any say about the federal projects in their community. We need a word or bill, but we don't need to sacrifice the environmental review process or a process that allows our constituents to have a say in how projects proceed. I hope when this bill moves to the Senate, moves to the Conference Committee with the Senate, that we can fix some of these, I think, egregious problems in the bill with regard to the environmental review process. But we do need a word or bill. We also need a transportation bill. And I would hope my colleagues on the other side could convince the Tea Party members to allow that to come to the floor, because we have an aging infrastructure, not only in terms of water projects, but in terms of highways, roads, and bridges, and I can go on and on and on. If we get this right, we can create some jobs. I urge my colleagues to oppose the rule and support the underlying bill.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd yield to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, 1 minute.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.